Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast, the podcast that is passing wisdom to the next generation of parents and coaches that are transforming young athletes into young leaders. I'm your host, Coach Furtado. In our episode today, we interview Dan Horwitz. Dan is the author of the book, Help Them Up. He is also a JV basketball coach. He has a leadership consulting company and is also a middle school teacher. In our episode today, we dive into his book, talking about the different principles of championship cultures. He has gone and been in the locker room of some great Division I teams and has really studied what the intangibles are. It's more than just talent, and we are really excited to present this episode with you. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Bridging Impact Podcast, Dan. I'm thrilled to have you on the show today and have a conversation around your book and the principles behind your book and just how sports can really impact the next generation. And so welcome to the show, Dan.
Yeah, so much for having me. Really excited to have a great conversation with you as well.
All right, so let's chop it up. What is your definition of impactful leadership?
Yeah, so I've listened to a few of your episodes and all your guests have been really good. And I think for me, I consider or like to use the word influence to define leadership. And I believe you're either lifting others up or pulling them down. And to have a positive impact, you need to use your words and actions to lift others up. And so I think that's how I would define it.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, words and actions. And it's really important that we kind of align those. And before we kind of dive into, talking leadership and talking about the principles in your book, I would love for you to share a little bit more about your story of, how you came to have that definition of impactful leadership.
Yeah, so grew up just loving all sports, played soccer, basketball, football, and just like loved being around a team. And I have a twin brother named Ben and an older brother David, so really got to play in the front yard playing some hoops, and at the school across the street playing some football and stuff, and just loved it and went on to play in high school and really focused on basketball year round once I got to sophomore year, and then had the opportunity to play Division III basketball. And not the most talented person or tallest person, but really just loved the game. And I reached out to over 150 colleges and emailed just like an introductory, like, hi, I exist, and this is my GPA, and this is what I think I could bring to your team. And I probably heard back from like 7 or 8 coaches, and then 3 ended up watching me play, and 1 said yes, and that was Newberry College. And loved my experience in Brookline, Massachusetts, and had a really great experience just being in a different state and getting to play against some of the top teams in the country. And my freshman year, our second game, we played the defending national champion Amherst College team. And so seeing those guys compete was like a big eye opener for me, like what a championship culture really looked like. And it was just a great experience for me. And then I progressed on to coaching at the Division III level for a few years. And now I currently work at a middle and high school and coach the JV basketball team there. And I've really enjoyed that. So that's kind of how I've gotten to where I am today.
That's beautiful. And I'm curious, kind of going back to your origin of when you were an athlete, obviously there's a level of persistence and love for the game if you're going to reach out to 150 schools. I'm curious, kind of what lessons you learned from that experience of just like constantly outreaching and honestly, probably I'm guessing at the time you were feeling a little bit, challenged with, I'm not hearing back from over 100 schools, but how did you keep, kind of pursuing?
Yeah, it's a great question and fun to think about it. I think just to answer the question, my coach that ended up saying yes at Newberry College, I emailed him 2 times, and then on the 3rd time is when he actually responded. And so that level of persistence of just like, hey, I really want to be there and have this opportunity. That was, that's kind of how that happened. But I think just being okay with people not responding or saying no, like, hey, we already have 3 point guards we're recruiting, like we're not interested. And it was just something I really wanted to do. And I visited about 3 or 4 different schools that I would have had opportunity to walk on at if I didn't get a guaranteed spot. And at the Division III level, there's no athletic money, right? You get academic money and based on needs. So my grades were okay in high school, so I got a good amount of money to go there, but you're still paying to go to school. And just really wanted the opportunity. So really glad it worked out. And one thing that I do share with people is that our team went 13-87. So we lost out of 100 games, we lost 87. So, but our team was really resilient and we stuck with it. And that really brought us close together. Unfortunately, on the scoreboard, we all wish we had done better. But I'm really grateful for the experience because that's really led into like my passion of learning from the best teams as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I'm about ready to dive into, what you've been learning from those championship teams, but I just want to touch on just the importance of the lessons that you're sharing right now on, continuing to reach out and outreach. I think that's one of the things that I learned from podcasting is at first, I would get disgruntled if, I reached out to a podcast guest and they, didn't reply, but it's just oftentimes people get busy, they look at it and then they don't. And, sometimes I love it when people, reach back out to me and say, hey, this is not a good time. Reach out to me here. That's like the best feeling ever. But most people, a lot of people don't have the time to do that. So that persistence, if you really love it and you really want something, that's the kind of level and effort that you have to put in to make it happen.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I think, as you mentioned, like if somebody reaches out to you and takes the time to do that, just giving an answer, whether it might be a tough no, like, hey, I'm not available to do this right now, or, get back to me, that just hearing something makes you feel, good that your message was received. And I think people, or maybe more so kids, like when I was in high school, are more unlikely to call someone opposed to writing an email or text or a Twitter DM or something like that. And so I just recommend that sending an email is great, and then giving a call, right? And just leaving a voicemail. I think that extra step goes a long way. And then if somebody does take the time to talk to you, writing a handwritten note to them, I think that's a rarity as well, and it does have a positive impact, writing a handwritten letter. So I definitely did a lot of all those things, and it took a lot of time, and people want things right now. But if you're willing to try to reach out to a lot of people and do all those steps, I think good things will happen.
Yeah, and to touch on that, I definitely am a big believer in handwritten notes. I try and handwrite a note to everyone who's been on the podcast. I wrote a note to everyone. I just left a position at Royal Basketball School. I wrote a note to all the coaches, right? And so, the reason is not obviously to get something in return, but it's just to show my appreciation. And I feel like when you're really appreciating what other people are doing for us and, you and me, right? Like we talked on the phone, Tammy, a great episode. If you haven't listened to that one yet, she introduced us. And then after we do that, we hop on the phone. I'm like, all right, great. Let's pot it up. And so those connections are honestly one of the biggest reasons I feel like I've been evolving, pretty quickly, quote unquote, for a 24-year-old, because I've been actually putting in and, some of the things and putting in the time that maybe like writing letters and having phone calls and, that may seem like a lot of time, but it's been really beneficial for me. And I know as a writer, you've obviously had to reach out and be like, what's this process like? So can you talk about how, people have helped you in the process of your pursuit as a writer and, working with youth, coaching, playing basketball, all that good stuff?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned Tammy Matheny. She's been a huge resource for me and a mentor and a friend. And as you mentioned, it was a great episode. So anybody that hasn't heard that yet, definitely go check out Tammy's episode and all of her resources. She's great. But so I guess thinking about always wanting to be a college head coach at the Division III level, I just kind of love the grittiness of Division III, and it's just people that love basketball but aren't getting money to do it, outside of academic scholarships. So I just always wanted to do that. And then when I decided to get out of college coaching, because the lifestyle is pretty, especially at that level, it's 24/7 a lot of the time, 365, and And so I just kind of wanted to change of pace and spend more time with family and friends, but also being able to do what I love. So I decided to take all these behaviors that I learned from studying the best teams in the country and turn it into a book. And Tammy was one of the people that I reached out to. I just Googled something and she came up in a podcast, and she helped me with the cover of my book with somebody that had helped her with hers, and also suggested another website that I could help with the formatting. And writing a book was completely new to me. I'd never done it, never thought I would do it. But having people like a Tammy, and then reaching out to other authors and people that were willing to help really helped me. And so like once I did it, I had like two people that were in my network, and they reached out, and I wrote a blog post about it to like help people. But it was just so nice to pay it forward for all the help that people had given me. So like I said, not a writer, but had an editor and had a lot of people help me out. But just spent like a whole summer waking up from 8 to very late and just would kind of chip away at it. And glad it came out pretty good, and that some people have taken the time to read it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it takes that chip away, like, a little bit each day. And I feel like it's pretty daunting because I've thought about writing books before, and it's just like the whole process is so scary. So having those people like Tammy, share with you how to do it. And I think that's something that's been really beneficial for me is like in the past, I've reached out to podcasters, and a lot of times now I'm talking to a lot of coaches now when I'm going through challenging circumstances, I reach out. Right. And I think it's kind of like, instead of trying to be like, I'm going to bootstrap it, I'm going to do it on my own, it's like I want to lean on people who have been successful in where I want to go, and just kind of, I don't like the phrase pick your brain, but like for lack of a better term, just learn from them. And so with that and your experience from watching some of these elite Division III basketball teams and coaches and players who just they're dedicated to basketball at that point. You're doing it for the love. I mean, you probably, the only really like news worthy and ESPN thing was when that guy scored 138 points in a Division III game. So, like you're doing it for the love of the game. I'm curious. I bet there's some real, organizations and teams that have those championship cultures. What sparked that idea to write about it?
Well, I think losing a lot of games while I was playing kind of sparked like, hey, we just played the reigning champion for Division III, or we just played the third ranked WPI team at the time, or whatever it was, and or MIT, and it was so cool to like see like not just their strategy, which was really good, but the way they communicated with each other, like the confidence, the unity, the energy from the bench. It was just very like well organized, and you could tell that they really cared about each other. So I would say, yeah, just losing games really sparked it. But also, I was fortunate that one of my good friends, Mike, his sister played at Tufts University, which is located in Boston, and they're Division III. And she, her senior year, was awarded the Division III Basketball Player of the Year award, and she was one of the most humble people that I've ever met. And so, getting to watch them play, that was a really a great way to like kind of see what a championship culture looked like. And then I spent a lot of time volunteering thanks to friends. Our SID in college, she got me connected with the NCAA tournament. So I got to go to Providence and see like Villanova and Texas Tech behind the scenes. And then I did it another year. And like I think West Virginia may have been there. And so there's like these really top level D1 programs. And I'm in the locker room like helping clean up, their ankle wraps and the towels or whatever. But I was just like soaking it all in and getting to like kind of see like how they interact with each other a little bit, and then like watch game film of them and see some of these behaviors. And so, and like you said, like I was very open to like call a coach, and honestly, coaches and people that are in higher up positions like love to share about their experience. And there's so much knowledge that like they're willing to share if you're willing to listen. And so I definitely like recommend doing that, whether it's reading a book or just reaching out to somebody, but like not just an email like, hey, I'd like to pick your brain, like you said, like, hey, watch this game or read this article about you, and like it really resonated with me because of this reason. Like, would you be willing to talk for 10 to 20 minutes? And I always like to put like a time limit on an email because maybe they don't have a lot of time. And then sometimes they'll just be like, hey, like we can talk as long as you need. So that's usually what happens. But I just loved learning, and then was so grateful for all the people that wanted to share. And yeah, it's been really rewarding sharing those principles with other people.
So it sounds like you've just been a sponge, and I think it's a really cool opportunity. And I'm glad you shared that. You got to go to these NCAA tournament games, and it was probably really special to, like, obviously be in the locker room during that atmosphere and see those teams in person, because there's so much that we just don't see on TV that you don't get to experience. The team camaraderie, and what do they do in the locker room? What's the speech? Obviously they'll do some of the clips, but they only do the clips when they win, right? So it's probably a really fascinating experience, and I'm sure you just soak that up like a sponge. And I'm curious how you came to the 14 principles for Help Them Up.
Yeah. So, well, and going back to what you just said, with like after a loss, like those guys or coach would always have an arm around the other guy. Like that's like the moment that they've worked for their whole life, is to be on national TV playing in March Madness. So just to see like the love they had for each other, whether they won or lost, that was really special. But in terms of the 14 principles, I just loved being a fly on the wall. That's like a phrase I like to use. And I would bring my notebook, and I'd go to a high school practice. I'd go to Harvard, had a coach's clinic for their men's team, or Yale men's basketball, went to practice there. And I would just reach out, and they're usually very willing to have you come by. And I just kind of started picking up on these little behaviors that like weren't very skill related. It was just like they were intentional about it. And the first principle in my book, Help Them Up, is called warm up. And basically, I went to a UConn women's practice, and it was like a 2.5 hour practice, like some of the best players, probably in the world with that team a few years ago. And they, with the women's team, they do like echo warm up. So if somebody says high knees, they all yell high knees, and they do it from one sideline to the other. And they were in like complete unison as they went, almost like a dance routine. It was just like amazing to see this. And then they came back, and they might yell like lunges, and then they would all do lunges, and it was just like so intentional, and it just showed like how connected they were as a unit. And that was just the warm ups, which like up to that point I had never really taken too seriously. Like I never had a coach that was like, hey, we're doing this to like really be, or to display a togetherness. And so that was like very eye opening, that the best team in the country is like taking their warm ups very seriously. And yeah, so that's kind of like where I just kind of took a principle from a best team, and I put that into the book. And that's kind of, through the 14, I give an example of a great team that really emphasizes it.
It's really interesting to think about the little things that we don't think matter, like warm-ups, right? Like I truthfully don't do an echo call like that, but I'm thinking about how I could implement it in a way that, because the challenge for me has been, with, I feel like college, boys and girls, men and women, they're a little bit more mature. I'm working with, the frosh off. So some of these ideas, like an echo call, may be a little bit challenging, but I'm trying to think about maybe creative ways of how I can, it's hard because in high school you want to be so cool, right? And it seems you don't want to do the goofy stuff, and you don't want to do some of that. So I've really realized, you kind of have to implement one small thing at a time, because if you come in and do it all at once, none of it's going to happen. I'm curious, I would love to learn and have you share a few of the other principles. And, if you've talked to, actually before you share some of the other principles, I'm notorious for asking multiple questions. Before you share that, I would love for you to, talk about, have you talked to a coach about how they implement some of these cultural principles? Do they do it all at once? Like, how do they enforce them?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate that I started a leadership consulting company where I do a lot of Zoom calls and some in person as well if they're in Connecticut. And there was a college team who I've actually worked with 3 years in a row out in Oregon, and they wanted to improve their culture, and they had talked about a good amount of the things that I have in my book, but they weren't doing them consistently. And the coach had me on with the team, and they chose 3 of the 14 principles to really emphasize. And one of them is huddles, and his team didn't huddle a lot. And that's like after a shooting foul. So I know I'm kind of like, sharing a little bit about one of the principles, but basically uh, in the book, it's principle 6. But after a shooting foul, some teams will have 5 players and they go right to the free throw line and they just get lined up. And other teams will have all 5 players put their arms around each other and then communicate a message. And I call it connect and communicate. And sometimes it just might be like, hey, next play, we're good. Or it's like a mini timeout and they'll call like whatever defense they're going to be in after the free throws or offense, whatever it may be. And he did a hand signal where he was both hands together, like making a circle and to huddle up. And then the bench would also yell, huddle, huddle. And so for a college coach to be emphasizing there's teams huddle up opposed to, anything else strategy wise, it showed that he really cared about it. And so his team started to do it. And then a few months later, they beat the number 1 team in their conference, in addition to some of the other principals. And he texted me saying like, hey, we just want to say thank you. Like we've implemented these and it's made a big difference. So, so the coaches taking the time to explain why it's important and have a discussion with their team, and then making sure that they emphasize it in games, I think is the best way for coaches to really get it to a point where they're building a championship culture.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's like prioritizing those principles that work for your team, right? Like, so the huddle, may be a little bit more challenging for my high school team, but it might work, better for the college team. And so I'd love for you to share a few more principles that I can potentially steal and start implementing before we hit regular season play.
Yeah, of course. And I think my biggest thing is I love to learn, but sometimes it's hard to, like you said, to implement so many ideas. So like my goal for today is like, to share a few principles and then like things that I do that actually could be like one small step towards actually like practically implementing it. So I know you have a variety. Yeah, exactly. Be intentional with it. So, and I have been told that like companies and other sports outside of basketball, even though the book was written for it, for example, like with touches, right? Like giving, Coach Popovich for the Spurs, he's like notorious for like going around the office and giving a pat on the shoulder or like a fist bump, like just to have that human connection. And so I learned that, like one of the greatest coaches of all time, really emphasizes touch, and that's like in the workplace, right? Obviously, like, fist bump and certain things like that are more, I guess, embraced in sports, but like it could just be like a verbal cue as well. But touches for me are a high five, a fist bump, a pat on the back, and our team really emphasizes it. And the best teams in the country, if you watch like Duke, North Carolina for men, or you watch UConn women and Stanford and Florida State, like some of these great teams, they do it as well. But one thing I'll do as a drill for touches is I'll say like our goal today is 100 high fives or 100 touches, and maybe they'll get to it, maybe they don't, but like they're like, okay, coach wants us to focus on this, and so that's one thing that I do. I'll say water break, and I'll say give 5. This is probably like for any level, this is probably the most fun one. But before water break, I'll say water break, give at least 5 teammates a high five, and they like run around and give each other high fives before their water. And that's been really instrumental in us really picking up that habit. And some of them were like, oh, 6, 7, like they try to compete with each other. And I have freshmen up to seniors on my team, so they make it fun. And then another thing that this one has been a little bit tough, but one of my friends, he does it with his team. So when you walk into the gym, you have to go around and give somebody a high five or fist bump before you shoot a shot, like if you're walking into practice. And right now it's a little bit forced, right, because we're implementing it. And for like adults that are more mature or at the college level, they're like, yeah, we're just acknowledging all of our teammates. Like it's kind of like common sense. But for the younger kids, it's like, oh, this is a little corny, or we're too cool to like go around and say hi to our friends that we've seen all day. So, but they were all, they all like emailed me and said, like, I asked them to like what their thoughts were on it. And they also said that they could get on board with it. So the buy-in from them was great. And so, and the last example I'll give is I just did a Zoom call with a team in Scotland. This is my second year doing it with them. And somehow this woman, Ruth, who's been so awesome to connect with the past 2 years, she read my book and is given a lot of credit for like helping her learn how to take small steps in building a culture. And one of the coaches on the call said, in high five and layup lines, we like don't give high fives and our body language is bad. And so I was like, my team did that last year too. And what I suggested was or told the team was, if we miss a high five, we're all going to do 10 push-ups. And like I love to do push-up. I don't like to like use it as a punishment to get them to do something, but I think push-ups are really helpful in us getting it stronger because we don't have a lot of time to go to the weight room. So like push-ups are really good for us. So I said, if we miss a high five, anybody, then we're going to do a push-up. So I had one assistant coach on one side, and I think I was on the other side, and they didn't miss a single high five. And then that's something we do before games, and they've been really, really good at it since we did that last year. So those are small, practical examples of like how you can get some touches in.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's something I've been big on. And I feel like that's honestly something that has maybe come a little bit more naturally to me. But I was, explaining to you the PGC. That's one of the big things that they talk about is, leading with high fives. And as a player, when I was playing varsity, I led the team in high fives, right? Like that was my contribution to the team. And I've kind of brought that to my, just like working with youth in general, like whether it was Boys and Girls Club, but now I'm a coach, right? So that's been a big thing. And I feel like now people like come in, they're like, they expect Coach Justin. I think that's what more the, the younger kids or my team knows me as, like, he's going to give me a high five, and that's always that welcome. But I think I want to, giving them a goal of, okay, 100 high fives. And, they might be silly about it at first, but if that's what it takes, and it takes them to, kind of be goofy about it and then eventually embrace it, I think that's part of the process. It never looks like it does in your head, like I'm not sure how that goes for you when you're establishing some of these, things for your culture, for your team. But I'm like, practice is going to look like this today. And it has, no shape or form. And not that it's a bad practice, right? It's just like kind of having a flexible mindset to, what the culture implementation will look like.
Yeah, and you're right. Like a lot of times it doesn't look how you want it to look, but I think like you as the leader, like if you're the coach and you're the one giving all these high fives, like it starts with you and like your energy. And so like when you're doing these things, like if you're invested in it, excited about it, like they might like have some fun with it, and think it's a little corny or whatever, but like usually if you empower the right kids on the team that are the leaders, and they can be the ones to kind of like, hey, you're in charge of making sure that we're giving high fives to each other. And like some kids like want to hear like, hey, there's an NBA study that the teams that touch more win more. Like if you Google that, it comes up. Julie Fournier wrote an amazing article. She does basketball as psychology on Twitter and has all these followers, and I've connected with her, and she's a great person to have on a podcast, and become a friend of mine. And like there's a study that like the best players are the ones, the Steve Nashes, that give the most high fives and fist bumps when he was MVP. So some kids like want that evidence, like, hey, this is actually going to work. And some just want to hear like LeBron James gives a lot of high fives, like, because that's their favorite player. So just finding different ways to communicate the same message, I think, has been pretty helpful to implement them.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a world of a difference because they can hear one thing coming from coach over and over again. But if the Warriors do it, if Steve Kerr does it, if Steve Nash does it, if LeBron does it, like, okay, maybe I'll try it. And then they start doing it. And, they're like, oh, it's not that hard to stick my hand out and, high five someone. So that's definitely like big. But I mean, we had I feel like some of the things I've been trying to implement, they've been kind of resistant. And then we played really well before Thanksgiving. And then, the energy started to be right. And I feel like that buy-in, like, okay, coach kind of knows what he's talking about, at least a little bit, so, and you start earning that trust. And, can you talk about, I'm sure building trust has got to be one of the 14 principles. I'm curious, it's a slower process than one would hope.
Yeah, it is. And winning helps a lot with getting buy-in. So I definitely understand that. And trust as like an exact principle is not one, but all of these things the whole point is to build trust and build unity. And like I mentioned earlier, it starts like with the coach, right? Like if you're leading by example and you're making eye contact with the kids and asking, hey, how's your day going? And hey, how did that math test go that you had? And sometimes people like me, I'm fortunate, I coach at the school that I work at. And some people just come into practice and coach. So it's not as easy to make those connections, but little things like that I think are really important. But yeah, building trust is probably the most important thing. And I think as a leader, like plenty of times I'm like, hey guys, I messed this up, or hey, I'm a little nervous right now. I get excited, like you, and they're like, and they smile. I'm like, I'm not trying to act like I know everything. And I think that kind of like shows them that like it's okay to make a mistake. And I also like try to take as much pressure off of them. Like a lot of times I'll be like, hey, like who's like anybody nervous? Like hands up for this game. Like I'm nervous, but like I'm also really excited, and just like things like missing a layup. I'm like, guys, I'll never get mad at you for missing a shot. But if you don't run back and make your four teammates have to play 5-on-4, then like I'm gonna get upset. And I'm not like a yeller by any means like that. Like I just try to like, hey, like shoot the shot. We have confidence in you, and if you miss it, like that's fine. But like go get a stop, go get it back. And so like that's kind of how I was coached. And I played for a woman coach named Coach Katie, and she was like the toughest coach I've ever played for. But like also believed in me and would yell like shoot it, Danny, when I was open. And like I never had a coach that would like tell me to shoot the ball, because I was always like a defensive player and a pass first point guard. So she like helped me a lot. So I try to like take all the little things from my coaches that helped me feel like they trusted me and coach in that way. So is there like a coach that you had that you kind of model some of their qualities when you coach now?
I, honestly, like as I hear you ask that question, I think inadvertently a lot of my coaching philosophy has actually been, taken from my varsity basketball coach, even though I didn't play that much. And honestly, like I wouldn't even say, we still talk actually now, but like at the time in high school, I wouldn't say our relationship was like great, or, we weren't on the same page or anything. It wasn't bad or anything. Just kind of like I was a bench player. And to be honest, it just wasn't there. But in the way of, how he talks about the basketball and the movement, and he was a musician, so he's always talking about kind of flow and basketball moving around. I think that had a big impression on me in terms of like how the game should be played. And like for me as a role player my whole life, even when I was like better as a younger player, like I was never that like creator off the dribble. Like I love the way the Warriors play. I love ball movement, and so that's one of the things that I really emphasize. And so obviously to have good ball movement, it requires us to be together. And so that's a big emphasis that I have with our team. And so he actually, made a big difference, in that way. And he was definitely like looking back on it. He always talked about being in the moment, and when high school, there wasn't a lot of like mindfulness out on that time around that time, or at least not at my school. So I didn't really know what in the wheat he was talking about. I was just like, okay, like it might be one of my last senior games. Right. So, but in general, like I think just like his style and philosophy of playing together, playing connected, ball movement, and a little bit of, I think, just tenacity has been something that's really important for me.
That's great. And it sounds like you picked up, you mentioned your coach, but you all like the music. Like, I think that's so great. And then also like just talking about like the Golden State Warriors or something, like, just having different examples and pulling from all those to make it your own, their own Justin version. That's incredible. That you've had people like that in your life. So.
I'm sure like for when you're building culture, like it's not like your culture is not obviously going to be 100% unique, but it is unique in the way that it's like where you take your ideas from are unique, right?
Mm.
It's like I'm going to take it from, from Duke. I'm going to take it from Stanford women's basketball. I'm going to take some from this, Division 3 school. So, and then kind of formulate and make it yours. And then that's kind of what ends up being the identity. And obviously it takes time, right? I'm curious, how, a couple of other principles that you have kind of learned, that have helped you, kind of understand how how things take time, but like just a principle that I don't even really know what I'm asking. I'm tripping over my words, but I just share a couple of principles.
Yeah, no worries at all. I completely understand what you're saying. But I think one that's fun for like everybody is the bench, right? Like I heard the word Benergy, and my twin brother's name was Ben, and he was always like the best teammate. So like bench energy, Benergy. So I think when teams, whether it's basketball or any sports team or like in a workplace, right, when a teammate of yours or colleague is presenting and like you're watching, maybe you helped, but like you're not the person presenting, like being a great teammate and providing that energy for your team is really important. And when you go to a basketball game specifically, like you can see you can literally watch one team's bench and the other team's bench. And so the best teams that I've seen, and honestly, it doesn't always mean that they're the teams that win all the time, but it's easier to cheer for your teams when you're winning. But the bench energy like has such a positive or negative impact on the game, and that's for like many reasons. And a few like practical examples I would recommend for coaches is like one, when your team has a substitution, like everybody on the bench stands up and give them a high five. And that player who's subbing out should jog off the court, and the person subbing in for them should give them a high five. And if you're guarding somebody in man-to-man defense, like communicate that. And then you jog off and go all the way down the line, and then you go sit down on the bench, and then you watch the game. So like that's something that like our team is really big on, is making sure we all stand up every time. We also stand up on every made basket. At our level, we don't score like a ton of baskets. The games are probably in like the 40s to 60s, so it's not like we're going up to 100 points. But like every time your teammate scores, like let's all stand up and cheer. And that's like a habit that took a while to get everybody on board for, and to stand up on subs. Like that took a while, but like it also turned into like so much fun, and it turned into like a player on game film running over to get water for teammates and going into the huddle and making sure they all had cups of water. And our teammates, our bench one time did the wave, and like I don't really agree with that, and like I didn't notice until after the season was over. Like I don't think that might be going a little bit too far doing the wave, but like it was something that was completely, they were all committed to doing. Like we made a shot and they all did the wave, and so like it is fun to like celebrate after made shots. And then our team, we subbed in. Our goal of mine for our team was to have everybody score at least once. And so we had our 3 games like back to back to back to end the season, and a kid that had never made a basket scored, and like the whole gym and the bench went wild. And then it happened again with a kid that had never made a layup. He made like 1 3 earlier in the year, and like and he was like a fan favorite, and the kids were like falling over each other. And so like that moment, and those moments are like what it's all about. And so I just think the bench has so much like power in it. And Tammy Matheny actually, I think, talks about like the smile battle, and like the teams that are smiling more and like having fun and like kind of like relaxed are the ones that play the best. And I think we can all kind of relate to that, just like being confident and having fun. And so the bench is a really important one that I like to talk about. And then another one that I like to talk about is a positive talk, and that's like a transferable skill for us in life. But like I talked to you, like you mentioned Justin on the phone, and like you just have this like super like optimistic and like positive energy, and it's like so like I like hung up that call and I was like, wow, like, I'm like feeling good right now, and like really excited to do this podcast call. And so like that was just you choosing like to like have a positive attitude in that moment. And so like in a game or in a practice when you're losing by a lot or you're having a bad day for whatever reason, and like your time with your team is like your job is to be the best teammate you can be and bring out the best in them. And if you're doing that, and then your 14 teammates are also, they feel like that's their responsibility, then like that environment is going to be so fun to be a part of. And I definitely like miss being a part of some of those cultures where like you walk in and like it's sad like now that it's over, but like with your team, your family, whatever it may be, your friend group, like you can still be very positive. And sometimes like that just means listening, right? Like listening to learn and not to respond. I think a lot of times people like want to respond right away, but like listening to learn is really important. And yeah, so I would just say positive talk is definitely like a powerful thing. And we're not always going to feel positive, but like, another Tammy thing is like what you focus on grows. And so if you're focusing on being positive, then more like most of the time you're going to be. So hopefully those made sense and are practical, that people can take something from it.
Yeah, you got some positive energy there because you're getting me excited. I'm like, I'm locked in, I'm focused, but I'm also like daydreaming at the same time about practice, being like, let's get the energy going. I think that's one big thing that's been kind of missing is that bringing the energy to practice. And I feel like when you bring it to practice, then you can bring it into the game. And so just like creating that environment that is so fun and so joyous. And for me, I think the biggest challenge will be that like battling the tightrope of being joyous and having fun and also being competitive, because I think sometimes as you can probably testify for coaching, teenage boys, sometimes that fun just turns into loosey-goosey basketball, turning the ball over, missing layups, not playing hard defense. And so that's something that, as we, get into the 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter of our podcast, like how have you navigated, the having just a ton of joy in practice, but also making it competitive?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that is tough, and like something that you have to be very intentional about every day. Like, are we having not too much fun, but like you said, it's mostly about like, are we here to work, and like, are we giving everything we have? And our mentality for our team is play together, and that just means, like you said, having joy. Like the word play means like having fun, right? And then together, like togetherness is what we high fives and helping each other up off the ground and the bench, and then outwork everyone. So play together, outwork everyone, and like if we're gonna be here, like it's a privilege, not a right, for us to be able to step on this court. Like we're all physically able to play this game. Like I've had injuries that like I broke my hand in my sophomore year of college, so I couldn't play, and I was me. Like why me? This season's about to start, and then there's a guy in a wheelchair and a full leg cast getting pushed out of the hospital. And instantly I was like, okay, I get to walk out of here. I can still do all the running drills. I can still do every defensive drill. I can work on my left hand, which is my weak hand. So like I instantly went from feeling bad to myself to like perspective. Like I get to walk out of here and be able to do something positive because I can. And so when it comes to like that gratitude and being competitive, like we're going to work because like the goal is to win. And I love like the John Wooden philosophy where he had great players, but he didn't really talk about winning. And so I don't think this season I mentioned winning. And like, I usually try to just do it one time. And I'm like, I just want you to know, like everything we're doing is to like help us win, but we're not going to define success like based strictly on the scoreboard. It's like, did you give everything you have in this practice, in this game, in our Google Classroom homework assignments, when I'm telling you to watch this Division III game, or like respond to these questions about leadership? Like, did we do everything to put ourselves in a position to win? And so like getting after it and having those one-on-one conversations, like Justin, I know you're like are capable of being our best defender, but like, did you really bring it today? Like, did you really sprint on that last one? And they're like, no, coach, like you're right, I'm sorry. And so like having those little conversations, I think really add up to like being competitive, hopefully at the end of the year when like it usually matters the most. So yeah.
Yeah, those one-on-one conversations they're everything. And I think that's something that I noticed with one of our players who he has, attitude challenges, so to speak, but I have one-on-one conversations with him every day. And after every single time and this is probably not for every player, because I have another player who I have challenges with and I have a conversation, nothing changes. Right. But with this one, athlete in particular, like he, for lack of a better term, balled out. He was talking a little bit on defense. He was kind of flying all over the place. And, sometimes he'll just dog it and, shell drill and be like, coach, this is boring, but I had a conversation with him after the first day. It was just like, I'm going to need you this year. We're going to need you to be a leader. We're going to need you to, handle the ball. And so obviously it's still going to be a work in progress because, he's a freshman in high school and, it's hard to be super consistent when you're that young. So, and that's the great thing about coaching is you're kind of talking about gratitude. You still like, found time, I can work with my left hand. I can still do this and that. And that's kind of choosing that positive mindset that you were talking about of like focusing on what you get to do. Like for me on what a terrible practice, it equals, I am grateful that this is my bad day. I will take this being my bad day any day of the week over, if I was in finance or, just doing a job that I just would hate, where every day I just feel like I'm beating my head against the wall, right? Like this is joyous that I get to have a bad day here.
I love that. Yeah, the get to versus have to. And like you're working with kids and you're getting to hopefully have a positive impact on them and have that joy. I think that's such a powerful word because joy is more like process driven and opposed to like an outcome, like happy or sad, like happy we won or sad we lost. Like joy is just like what you choose your mentality to be while you're doing whatever you're doing. So that's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I love it. It is really all about the process. And for the, the last, part of the podcast, what like final piece of advice would you give to the coaches and parents that are listening to this podcast?
It's another very good question. I would say just like choose to try to find the positive in situations, and there is always something good that you can focus on. And nowadays, social media and just like a lot going on in the world. And so I just think like consuming, positive things, if you're going to choose to be on Twitter, Instagram, like I try to follow positive like people and videos and stuff like that. And then that helps like feed me and motivate me into like wanting to do that, give that energy to others. And I think we always have a choice, right? Like not every day is going to be great, but there is something great in every day, and trying to focus on that would be my advice to people. And I surround myself with people that also feel that way. And the days I'm not feeling it, they bring that energy, and it just kind of reciprocate. So that would be my advice to others.
I love that. And it's so important for our content feeds to be part of our daily diet as well, right? Like what we follow, what we consume every single day. Because all of us, I would say 95% of the people that are listening, maybe 5% have a track phone. I don't even know how they're listening to this then, that we're on social media, right? And so we have to be really mindful about that. And, a lot of our conversation, I think, a running theme is, and something that I was thinking about this morning while I was having my Sunday morning coffee, is just intentionality and being really intentional with what we choose to do. And I think that's something that Tammy talks about a lot, is just recognizing the choice and the power we have over that. And so I really appreciate your time today. I would love for you to share, where can people find and connect with you? Because, Dan's here to connect with the people, right? And pass the wisdom along, and where can they find your book?
Yeah, so happy to connect with anybody and talk about anything. My email is contact, CONTACTDAN, and my last name Horwitz, HORWITZ @gmail.com. And on Twitter, Dan Horwitz, #1. On Instagram, I think it's Dan the Man. Kid in college would call me that my freshman year, so that's where the name came from. But Dan the Man 0419, and then the book is Help Them Up. Help Them Up, just how it sounds, on Amazon. And if you're interested in like signing up for a Zoom call with your basketball team or anything like that, feel free to reach out. Happy to help.
Appreciate it, Dan. We could talk all day, but we might have to do a part 2. So have a great day, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for all that you do, Justin.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.